Welcome to Coronavirus Impact. I'm Larry Casper. We have on the phone with us PA Congresswoman Susan Wild. Welcome to our program.
Thank you so much, Larry.
Tell us about the part of Pennsylvania that makes up your legislative district.
Thank you so much for asking. Pennsylvania 7 is a district that is composed primarily of working families as well as a lot of seniors, retirees, and so forth. Not a particularly wealthy district. We are only an hour and a half from New York City, but we are as far from New York City in terms of demographics as could possibly be. This is a community made up of families and people who are very worried about how they're going to be paying their rent, how they're going to be paying student loans, and frankly, many people worried at this point about how they're going to put food on the table. So we have a lot of small business owners. We have a huge number of healthcare workers because we have two very fine hospital networks. And everybody here is just doing their best to keep their families safe and healthy while some of them doing their jobs, most of them, however, staying home.
The president approved direct payments to Americans. How did that debate go in Washington?
That was an interesting debate, but it didn't last for long. It was interesting how quickly we were able to come together on this recent bill, the CARES Act, and which of course includes the direct cash assistance. I was gratified, and one of the things that I have been speaking to a lot of people about is how wonderful the bipartisanship was, how people really put aside their personal philosophies and acted in a way that I think was most needed and very quickly needed.
So how much will each check be worth, and when do the checks go out?
The individual amounts are $1,200 per person up to a threshold income. In other words, if you earn more than $75,000, you're not going to get one of these checks. A married couple will get twice that, and they'll each get $1,200, and they can earn up to $150,000. And then minor children or children who are dependent, who are not minors but are still called dependents on their parents' tax returns, will qualify for $500 additional payments to the parents.
And Congresswoman, can you tell us how all those figures were arrived at during debate?
It was a process of negotiation. As I said before, it was a quick negotiation. A number of people, myself included, felt that the number needed to be higher, but it's a very good first step. Now, you asked before about how quickly will it be received.
Yes.
I am hearing now that the law has been passed, it is up to the administrative agencies to disperse these funds. I was a little dismayed yesterday to hear that it may take up to 3 weeks, which presumably is 3 weeks from last Friday when we passed the bill. And that is far too long, in my opinion. We need to get the money out much more quickly.
So that sounds like about mid-April.
Yeah, and people have already, most people have already missed a paycheck. So I'm very, very concerned about any delays. And I hope that we can expedite this process. We're working on doing that.
So what's in the relief package for unemployment compensation benefits?
So the unemployment compensation benefits expands by $600 the unemployment insurance that somebody would typically be eligible for. Unemployment runs through the states. So each state is different, but the federal government will be adding $600 to each individual's unemployment per week that is going to be that they apply for. In addition to that, it extends the period of time for unemployment to a longer period of time, and it also waives the requirement that there be a 1 week gap between your period of unemployment and when you start to collect unemployment benefits. So everybody is eligible immediately for those. Everybody who's unemployed is eligible immediately to apply.
Overwhelming our healthcare system, of course, is an important concern these days. What kind of relief is in the package from the federal government that'll help these hospitals that are or will be overburdened?
Well, there's $150 billion in the package for hospitals and healthcare and the healthcare system that is a combination of funds for PPE, which we've all heard so much about, as well as staffing issues, research, vaccines, the development of vaccines, research, and that kind of thing. There's a tremendous amount of money in the package for hospitals. Quite honestly, we're probably going to have to do more for the hospitals further down the road. I have two outstanding hospital networks in my community, as I mentioned before, the Lehigh Valley Health Network and St. Luke's University Health Network. It is not just a matter of people's health or the economic situation. It's both. Health or economics is, in my view, a false contrast because those two networks in my district are the biggest employers. So when I advocate for funding, it's, of course, first and foremost for public health, but it's also an economic issue. All of these people need those paychecks, and conversely, these hospitals need these employees.
How can the federal government help closed businesses get back on their feet?
So there's a big infusion of money for small businesses in the Act to assist people, particularly small businesses, and it's not companies over 500 employees are not eligible, but smaller companies are, and there is SBA loan assistance, which is forgivable. Small businesses who are able, with the help of the SBA, to maintain their staffing, in other words, keep their employees on the payroll, will have their loans forgiven. There are provisions in the bill so that people or businesses with existing SBA loans will be able to apply for forgiveness or for deferral of the amounts that are currently due, because, of course, they've got ongoing loan payments that are required to be paid.
We often talk about social distancing, and Congress is no exception, of course. So when you had to vote on the federal relief package, you ended up going to Washington to make that vote happen. Now, I understand it could have been avoided. So what happened?
Well, I had been planning to go down because I wanted to speak on the bill. A $2 trillion bill is not something that is done often. In fact, it's never been done before, and I felt that it was important to address some of the needs that would be met by this bill. So I had been planning to go down, but the day before we voted on the bill, there started to be some discussion of at least one member who was going to insist on a quorum call or a roll call recorded vote. So with that, a number of people who hadn't been planning to go down to Washington made the trip, mostly East Coast people that didn't have to get into planes and fly. But there were probably 200 people present on Friday, and far more than the CDC would have approved of.
So just so I understand, I just wanted to make sure you required a unanimous vote to avoid meeting in the chamber to vote on the federal relief package?
Yes. If there hadn't been discussion, and as it turned out, one individual did object, we would have been able to do it by unanimous consent, meaning that it would not have required the physical presence of anybody in the House chamber for purposes of voting.
So try to paint a picture for us. How did the chamber look that day? I understand some lawmakers sat in the public gallery, which overlooks the floor. Tell us about what you saw.
So many members sat up in the gallery. I did not. I was actually on the House floor, but I spoke early in the day, and then I retreated outdoors and sat on the Capitol steps until I was told that it was time to go in and vote. And the House physician was actually kind of acting like a general, and I say that in the kindest possible way. He was making sure that members were not congregating near one another and that we had multiple seats between each one of us on the House floor, and he was shooing people outside as soon as their time to speak had finished. So we were all practicing social distancing on the floor. Having said that, there were still more people present than I think anybody was comfortable with.
So was this the most expedient way to get this federal relief package done, Congresswoman, was to meet in person in the chamber?
It was the only way to get it done at that point in time, yeah.
So let's talk about, I understand you're supporting something called a special health insurance enrollment, and there's a period during which the public could enroll during emergencies like this one. Tell us about it.
That's correct. Senator Casey and I are co-leading this. It's because, first and foremost, because every single American deserves health care, especially at times when an individual's health affects our larger public health. And what we need is is for people to be able to get health care coverage and to have the freedom to get better, more comprehensive coverage without waiting until the next open enrollment period. So the example I'll give you is a young person, perhaps in his early 20s, who has assessed himself as being healthy, not likely to need much in the way of medical treatment, and perhaps has opted for a health care plan that's not very comprehensive. And now has decided that because of whatever circumstances, he needs a better, more comprehensive plan. This bill would establish a special enrollment period of at least 30 days open to anyone who wants to enroll. It would ensure that patients can get preventive, diagnostic, and treatment comparable to what they might expect for similar services outside of a public health emergency. And it would waive restrictions and limitations on access to covered benefits, such as prior authorization requirements and limitations on filling or refilling prescription drugs. One of the things that we've heard a lot about is people's concern about access to their prescription drugs, wanting to get more than what is normally dispensed pursuant to their health plan. People don't want to leave their homes frequently to get prescriptions refilled. They've been advised not to leave their homes if at all possible. So one of the elements of this bill is that it would allow for greater filling of prescriptions in greater quantities.
I understand the president renewed funding for Meals on Wheels. How does that program work and who benefits?
Well, I'm pretty excited about that. When the president signed the CARES Act into law, he signed with it a bill that I had introduced. I was able to take work that I had done on the Older Americans Act, which had already passed, and add it into the current stimulus package. And what it does is it takes funding that the states are allocated by the federal government for congregate meal programs. So think of a senior center where elderly people go during the day. They meet, they play games, they do whatever they do. They have a meal there, and then they go home. Well, now, of course, they're not able to participate in congregate activities, and they may have lost a source of nutrition as a result. What this bill does is it allows flexibility for the states to transfer the monies that were previously used for these congregate meal programs to delivery services like Meals on Wheels. Previously, states were not allowed to transfer those monies. They were kept in separate accounts. So, and I'm happy to say it had a whole lot of bipartisan support. We know that our seniors are first of all, they're very vulnerable during this period of time of COVID-19. Secondly, we know they need their nutrition. Many of them were not signed up for something like Meals on Wheels or other delivery services, and this solves that problem for the seniors.
So was the program due for renewal anyway? In other words, it seems the timing of the renewal is fortuitous given our current circumstances.
Well, the Older Americans Act had passed, I don't know when, recently, in the last few months. And that was also happened on a very bipartisan basis. This is an amplification of the Older Americans Act. So what I did and what others have done is tweaked the Older Americans Act to add things that are specific to COVID-19, and those things made it into the CARES Act. Another example is mental health screenings in supportive services and giving local organizations the ability to combat social isolation in seniors. So those are the core focuses of a bill that now we believe will also address how COVID is disproportionately affecting senior citizens.
Well, let's talk more about the particulars of your district and how busy Meals on Wheels is, of course, given senior centers being closed, given the outbreak.
Meals on Wheels in my district is desperately in need of volunteers. They are busier than they've ever been. Their volunteers are a very, very loyal group. Some of them, unfortunately, are vulnerable themselves. A lot of seniors actually like to volunteer to deliver meals for Meals on Wheels, and they're being discouraged from doing so. We have a lot of college students who are home now. We're encouraging them to volunteer for Meals on Wheels, to do the delivery, and Meals on Wheels has it set up so that there's no point of contact. The meals are prepared by paid staff. They are packaged very carefully, and the volunteer driver does not even come into the facility. The meals are brought out to his or her car, and they drive around to the route and deposit them at the front door of the recipient. So Meals on Wheels is very busy in my district. We have a lot of senior citizens, and more so than average for a district this size.
Last question, Congresswoman. The legislation is supposed to help identify seniors having trouble with social isolation. What can be done specifically?
Well, so some of the tweaking that we've done, the expansion of the Older Americans Act actually provides support for organizations that provide supportive services, whether it be by telehealth, mental telehealth, phone, or otherwise to senior citizens. It provides more resources for them, and actually has all kinds of funding available for the express purpose of combating social isolation in seniors, which is personal for me. It's a very deep concern. I'm very worried about our seniors being isolated. And we know that they are very much at risk, and I think that we've got to make sure that we're doing everything we can, not just on a voluntary basis or a family basis. Some of these seniors don't have family who are checking on them every day, but even those who do have family, we hear constant reports of people who aren't seeing their children or grandchildren because of this crisis, and we've got to make sure that those people have supportive services.
All right, that's all the time we have. Thank you very much, Congresswoman Susan Wild.
Thank you, Larry.
A more coronavirus impact after a short break.
Take a nostalgic look back at some of the best games PCN has televised over the past 20 years with PCN Sports Classics. Watch the entire game without interruption and get updates on key players and coaches who have made Pennsylvania sports history. Watch new episodes monthly and stream the full series on demand with the PCN Select streaming service. Visit PCNTV.com to subscribe. PCN, proud to bring Pennsylvania sports to you.
Tired of unbalanced views and networks pushing their own angles? PCN brings it to you straight. We don't edit what was said to fit a point of view. We bring you the entire event. No slant, no editing, the whole story. A complete view without the angle. Watch PCN on cable and on the PCN app. Stream politics and policy on your favorite device for free.
We have on the phone Steve Bulger from the U.S. Small Business Administration. Welcome to our program.
Thanks for having me.
Steve, in a general sense, tell us what your office does.
Sure. I'm the regional administrator for the Small Business Administration in the Mid-Atlantic region, which includes Pennsylvania. We have 2 district offices in the state, one in Philadelphia, one in Pittsburgh, and they pretty much split the state up. They provide services, lending information, guaranteed loans, et cetera, to our small businesses across the state.
So, Steve, what is your office hearing from businesses that have had to close due to the outbreak?
It is a desperate time, Larry, right now for a lot of businesses. We have people calling us constantly. Some of the stories are heartbreaking. Some of these small business owners, they feel like they could face financial ruin. Everything they've worked for, all the hard work they've done is really being threatened. And it's a very difficult time for small businesses across the state and across the country, and we really want to do all we can to assist them.
Is there any specific story, Steve, that comes to mind you can share with us that'll really help illustrate the problems out there?
I don't. There's so many, Larry. Restaurants that, especially the restaurant and hospitality industry, has been hit very hard. And for example, I know one restaurant owner. Not only has he had to shut his business, he's had to lay off all his employees who are his friends. He knows all their families, so it's really personal. Plus, a lot of small businesses, including him, have their home mortgage tied as collateral to the business. So not only could they lose their business, they could lose their home and really face financial ruin. So we're really trying to do all we can as quickly as we can to get money out there into their hands so they can keep their businesses going and keep their employees on the payroll.
And we'll talk more about that in a minute, Steve. But first, tell me, what are the owners of these closed businesses doing with all this time on their hands?
A lot of them are scrambling on how to find money, how to cut costs, they're contacting their creditors, their landlords, the utility companies, asking for deferrals of their bills that are coming due, especially now, April 1st. And I'm really glad to report that a lot of companies, a lot of landlords across the state are giving some of these small business owners a break. We hope that everybody would as much as they could, but that is something that it shows the response of the people across the state that we know it's an emergency and there is a lot of cooperation going on out there, but we need more.
Steve, you said a lot of stories are coming into your office from small business owners who are in trouble during this closure. Have there been any consequences you've heard about from the shutdown that weren't anticipated or even came as a surprise?
Yeah, I would say it was a shock to just about everybody. No one really saw this coming. I mean, we really were in the state, really had an excellent economy heading into the middle of February. Things were really good. Our loan volume was way up. Businesses were thriving. We were getting great reports. And then it's like we hit the wall. All of a sudden, it completely knocked the wind out of so many small businesses. There have been a couple that we've heard that have actually benefited, if I were to say that, like, for example, environmental services or cleaning companies that are now being hired to go in and clean, wipe down offices and businesses and homes and things. But the overwhelming impact has been very negative.
Now, businesses have a whole list of expenses, of course, rent, mortgage, keeping the lights on. Are banks and utilities willing to postpone payments they're due?
We're hearing more stories out there that they are. Not every bank, not every utility, but they know that it is a crisis, an unanticipated crisis that everybody's facing. So we're urging, I know the president is urging as many companies out there that do collect from small businesses, whatever that accounts receivable is. We are asking, just try, if you can, give them a little breathing room, to give them some time to work through this and to get back on their feet so they can stay alive.
And in just a minute or so, we're going to talk more about solutions that your office offers to this problem. But on a pessimistic note, let's just get it out of the way. Is your office aware of any business that won't be able to reopen its doors?
We haven't heard that definitively. There's rumors out there that some businesses are saying, we're not going to be able to make it. We're not going to be able to reopen. And in fairness, there were some businesses out there that were doing good, right? They were not having great years in some areas. So there's always businesses that are struggling in any economy. There weren't a lot, but there were some. Those are the ones who are going to have the hardest time reopening.
So now, Steve, let's talk about specific solutions that can emanate from your office that'll help these businesses that have had to close during the outbreak.
Well, we've got two major programs through the Small Business Administration that small businesses can access. The first, and which is open today, is the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, or EIDL. that is available on our website at www.sba.gov, sba.gov. And online, you can apply for these loans. You can get more information on what they're all about. That program has been open now for almost 2 weeks, and we are seeing incredible demand, not only from across the state of Pennsylvania, but the entire country. So that program allows businesses to take loans directly from SBA with very easy terms. It can go up to $2 million. You have 30 years to pay it off with a very low interest rate. And those proceeds from the loan can be used to pay your bills, either payroll, accounts payable, rent, utilities, mortgage, things like that. It's really a working capital loan for our small businesses to try and get them through the next few months.
So who qualifies for these loans, Steve? And I understand you can borrow as little as or up to $10,000 too. The $2 million loan, that's a separate program, right, from the $10,000 program?
Actually, it's a good question. They're tied in together. In the legislation that Congress passed and the president signed last week, there is a part. This program has been out there for a while. SBA has used this disaster loan program many times in the past at other disasters. But the Congress and the president did beef this one up so that if you apply for the loan, the EIDL loan at SBA.gov, you will be eligible for up to a $10,000 immediate payment from the U.S. Treasury to your business. That's a formula. It depends on how many employees you have, but you can get up to $10,000. And that, if when you do submit your application and the application is ultimately not approved for whatever reason, you will still get to retain that money and you won't have to pay it back. So we're trying to get as much money out there as quickly as possible. So that's the EIDL program. And we also have, starting Friday, the big program, which Congress and the president is putting to the SBA. That is the Paycheck Protection Program, and that begins this Friday, which is going to be administered through all of the banks and lenders in the SBA network.
So, Steve, if closed businesses get relief from your office, are they allowed to get relief from any other source or creditor?
Yes. We are not trying to deter anyone from getting money anywhere else they can. There are some considerations we have to take into account. For example, if you have business interruption insurance, then with the economic injury disaster loan, you've got to use that first before you get our loan. So if you have credit elsewhere, you have access to other money. SBA, we look at the economic injury disaster loan as a loan of last resort, so to speak. But with the Paycheck Protection Program, which starts on Friday, that there are no considerations like that. And the really good thing about that loan is it's going to be forgivable, completely forgivable for those businesses that use the proceeds of the loan to pay their workers over the next couple of months.
What about paying off existing loans on previous disasters? What happens there?
SBA has put a hold on all of our disaster loans right now. There's a deferment right now for up to a year for any current SBA disaster loans out there. And in fact, yesterday, the administrator, Carranza of SBA, announced that all SBA loans, and there's billions of dollars of them, even in the state of Pennsylvania, all those loans now have a 6-month period where SBA will not only pick up the interest payment, but the principal payment as well for any existing SBA loan for the next 6 months, which is a really helpful thing for a lot of small companies out there.
Steve, have you ever seen a level of activity like this before in your office?
Larry, it is off the charts. We have been going literally 24/7, not only at headquarters, but in our district offices in Philadelphia and Pittsburgh for the last 2.5 weeks. This is the biggest crisis SBA has ever endured in our 67-year history serving small business. It's really the biggest crisis facing our country economically since World War II and the Great Depression. So, no, it's off the charts, and everybody's all in to help as much as possible.
And Steve, we're near the end of our interview, and I'd like you to summarize what businesses should do right now if they want help from your office.
Two things, Larry. The first is I would go to sba.gov, www.sba.gov, and look at the two programs that are available. The Economic Injury Disaster Loan, which you can apply online right there at SBA, or the Paycheck Protection Program. There's information on that, and that's going to go through your local bank. So after you get that information, contact your local bank. That program opens up on this Friday, and a lot of companies are already lining up with their banks to take advantage of that. So those are the two things we encourage every small business to do to make sure they're getting access to these really incredible and unprecedented programs that Congress and the President are providing to our small businesses.
All right, that's all the time we have. Thank you, Steve Bulger of the U.S. Small Business Administration.
Thank you.
That's it for Coronavirus Impact. Join us weekdays at 12 noon and 8 p.m. You can also watch us on our mobile app, PCNTV.com, Facebook, and YouTube. I'm Larry Casper. Thanks for watching.